Why is there no other intelligent being on Earth besides us? What happened to those who were similar to us? What caused them to disappear? Let's take a trip to the far, far past today, when we were not alone. Other creatures like us lived on this planet. Stay tuned until the end to learn more about engaging, less discussed topics. Evidence indicates that the early ancestors of humans split from the ancestors of chimpanzees about 7 million years ago. Prior to that, they were both the same being. But over time, they separated into two separate species. Several million years before that, gorillas and orangutans separated from this common ancestor. This new branch is known as hominins. Their characteristics included a larger brain, walking on two legs, and making complex tools. This branch was also separated into various sub-branches over time. But now, all of them are extinct and we are the only ones left. First, let's take a look at some of the family members. Hominins first appeared in Africa about 7 million years ago. Tree climbing was still possible even though they walked on two legs. Toes evolved into more walking-friendly shapes over time. Gradually, various species of hominins were created and spread across Africa. In some regions, there were more than one species. Their ability to make tools allowed them to withstand harsh environments. The oldest stone tool we found belonged to Homo habilis, a species that lived more than 2 million years ago. Homo is a Latin word that means human. Homo habilis means handyman. It is thought that Homo erectus was the first hominin to migrate out of Africa and spread to Asia and Europe almost 2 million years ago. Homo erectus, which means upright man, had a larger brain than its ancestors, almost 2/3 of ours. Homo antecessor, or pioneer man, was another species of hominin. Pioneer man got its name because, according to fossils, it was the first hominin to migrate from Africa to Western Europe about 1.2 million years ago. The next one was Homo heidelbergensis, or Heidelberg man. This species got its name because it was first found near Heidelberg, Germany. About 700,000 years ago, he lived in a large area of Africa, Europe, and Asia. It appears that Heidelberg man was the first hominin to build a shelter with wood and stone and was able to live in colder climates. Probably the next one you have heard more about is the Neanderthals, or Homo neanderthalensis, named for an area around Düsseldorf, Germany. Neanderthals are the closest hominins to us. They lived on Earth from 140,000 to about 40,000 years ago. They lived mainly in Europe, some parts of the Middle East, and Asia. Their broad, muscular bodies helped them survive harsh conditions and cold weather. They were consummate hunters who hunted and ate anything from rabbits to mammoths. It used to be believed that Neanderthals were primitive cavemen, but further research has shown that they weren't so low-level creatures. They were able to make clothes for themselves, use medicinal plants, make stone tools, and even make jewelry out of shellfish and bones. Their brains were almost the size of ours, and they were probably capable of speaking. There are also some who believe they had early religious beliefs. There was another group, the Denisovans, named for the Denisovan cave in Siberia. Between 300,000 and 50,000 years ago, they also lived in Europe and many regions of South and East Asia. As well as having many similarities with Neanderthals, their living environment was sometimes shared with both Neanderthals and us. In the end, we reach ourselves, Homo sapiens, Latin for the wise man. We seem to have originated in Africa as well, but we do not know exactly when we migrated. It was probably a time between 60,000 and 300,000 years ago. The reason may have been climate change and drought in Africa. This was a brief and general introduction to some of the most well-known members of hominins. There are many more cases. New discoveries are made all the time. For us, the important question is, why are we the only ones left in this large family? The causes of human species extinction, except for us, can be divided into three categories. There is no single cause of each extinction, of course. Many times, a series of factors can work together to destroy a species. The first reason, which is very interesting, is ourselves. The wise man, whether he willed it or not, contributed to the extinction of the rest of the hominins. Hominins who migrated out of Africa earlier than us and spread across Europe and Asia. Neanderthals, for example, were together with us in Europe between 2,000 and 5,000 years ago, which is not a short period. This long period indicates that they were neither much weaker nor less intelligent than us. Otherwise, they would not have been able to resist us for several thousand years. We were never very peaceful creatures, and we are not now. We don't even pity ourselves, let alone others. We have enslaved or killed our fellow man for thousands of years, just because their thinking differed from our own. You will not find anyone who is so violent towards other beings among all the beings that have come and gone. I believe the reason we fear artificial intelligence is that we believe it will treat us as we treat other creatures if it dominates us. In the first instance, slavery and killing come to mind, while there may be better alternatives. There is a fascinating topic about bonobo monkeys that I think could provide us with some good clues. Chimpanzees and bonobos are both members of the chimpanzee family. Although they have 99.6% genetic similarity and look very similar to each other, they behave very differently. Chimps can be extremely violent. They can kill their own kind, rape, and hunt other monkeys in groups. On the other hand, bonobos live very peaceful lives. They resolve their problems by hugging and kissing rather than fighting. But what made these cousins behave so differently? Chimpanzees and bonobos were actually one species, inhabiting areas north of the Congo River about 1 to 2 million years ago, the deepest river in the world. Drought and a lack of food plagued its northern parts, while the southern areas fared better. Evidence shows that the water level of this river has decreased considerably in a short period of time. Hence, these ancestral apes were able to cross through it and reach the southern regions. After the river was flooded again, the two groups were separated completely. Those who remained in the north had difficult conditions. On the one hand, the food resources were reduced and they had to fight for food. On the other hand, they were conflicted with powerful enemies, including gorillas. Because of this difficult situation, those who were weaker were destroyed, but those who were tougher and stronger remained, and their generation survived. Consequently, after thousands of years, their living environment led them to become a violent and warrior species, which are today's chimps. What happened to those who crossed the river? They had fewer enemies, and there were many food sources there. So there was no need for conflict and violence to survive. They evolved into a different species over time, which interestingly resolved their problems instead of fighting by kissing and hugging. And females became leaders instead of males. So, perhaps our harsh nature is a result of the harsh environment in which we evolved. When we encountered other hominins on our journeys, several things happened. Firstly, we fought with them over food and territory, a long attrition war in which we sometimes won and sometimes lost. Fossils in some areas indicate that the area has been passed from one hominin to another several times. Secondly, we merged with each other. Recent research shows that Europeans and Asians have 1 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA. According to some research, East Asians have Denisovan DNA. Some people believe Tibetans can live at high altitudes because their genes come from Denisovans. Or Asians have traces of Homo erectus DNA in their DNA. We can therefore say that other hominins were not completely destroyed. Only parts of them were dissolved into another species, namely us. There is, of course, the issue that a child born to two different species will not be able to reproduce. So, when hominin species were able to mix and the generation of hybrid creatures continued, they could no longer be considered separate species. We do not yet have a definitive answer to this question. Thirdly, we probably brought diseases to hominins. The parasites and diseases that our bodies had become resistant to but were unknown to their bodies and affected them. There have been many instances of this in these new migrations. The Europeans and Asians who entered America carried diseases that were safe for them, but the Indian bodies were not resistant to them. So, we were the first reason for their extinction. The second reason is the changes in the living environment. The generation of any species that can adapt to the changes in its environment has a greater chance of surviving. Hominins were also subject to this law. Those who could migrate from a harsh environment or make clothes and shelter for themselves had a better chance of survival. It appears that climate change played a significant role in the extinction of Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and Heidelberg men. Due to the cooling of the environment, their food sources had become scarce, increasing conflict and violence. We should take this warning seriously because the danger of climate change is very serious. The third reason is internal problems. The harsh environments isolated some hominins into small groups. This lifestyle has the disadvantage of slowing down their progress. Although Neanderthals had complex tools, their small societies made them less advanced than intelligent humans. Inbreeding was the bigger problem it caused. The genetic diversity of these populations decreases as closely related individuals mate. As a result, they were more vulnerable to diseases and climate change. Additionally, their physical characteristics contributed to their extinction. Because of the skull and brain differences of Neanderthals, their creativity, computing power, and social behavior were probably inferior to ours. These differences were small, but these small details are very crucial for natural selection. For example, due to our superior running abilities, we were able to hunt and escape from predators more effectively than Neanderthals. The division of labor has also been proposed as a possible idea for the extinction of Neanderthals. It seems that both male and female Neanderthals participated in hunting, while intelligent humans divided labor often, which caused supplying food or child rearing to become more efficient. So we discovered that a branch of creatures called hominins appeared, which were smarter than the others, and investigated the reasons for their extinction. Another question arises here, however. Other than humans, why couldn't other creatures reach such an advanced level of intelligence? Why didn't the lion, the horse, or the elephant become as intelligent as us after millions of years? Before I answer, I ask one more question. Why are giraffes the only creatures with such long necks? We all know about the example of giraffes used in the discussion of evolution. It is known that when the giraffe ancestors faced a lack of food, those with longer necks than others, due to random genetic mutations, could more easily feed on the leaves on the upper branches of the trees. As a result, their chances of survival would increase, and they would pass on this characteristic to the next generation. Why didn't the monkeys' necks grow longer? Because they solved the problem differently. They climbed the tree. It is likely that the same thing happened with intelligence. In our ancestors, those who were mentally and physically stronger or could communicate with others better had a higher chance of survival. We, living beings, are the product of our environment. Lions do not develop a great deal of intelligence and memory with time, unless something happens in that environment over millions of years that allows lions with higher intelligence to survive. Therefore, other creatures are not as intelligent as us because they didn't need to be. So why did we need to be intelligent? The reasons for this are varied, but we still don't know for sure. Having bigger brains probably allowed us to keep more babies alive. Another reason can be complex social relationships. We helped each other to find food or protect our children. Our ability to control and use fire also accelerated our progress. In this way, we could cook foods such as meat or hard nuts and fruits, which take a lot of time and energy to digest before eating. Therefore, our jaws and teeth became smaller, since cooking made eating food easier. Also, cooked food provides our bodies with more energy. As a result, our brains, as the body's most energy-consuming organ, grew larger because more energy was available. The enlargement of the brain made us smarter, but also created problems. A drawback was that having a large head made the birthing more challenging. So the baby was born earlier and earlier over time to have a smaller head and be easier to deliver. The downside of this early birth is that they will be completely vulnerable for several months after birth. Another issue is that intelligence does not imply that one creature is completely stupid and another is completely intelligent. A man is smarter than a chimp than a dog than a mouse, and a mouse than a fish. So it may not be appropriate to classify living beings as intelligent or unintelligent. Each of them has its own abilities. Finally, I would like to point out that intelligence does not always be improved. A prime example is the koala. Research indicates that about 30 million years ago, early koalas had to eat eucalyptus leaves as the Australian climate became drier, an incredibly low-quality and low-value food that took a long time to digest. On the one hand, a low level of energy reached its body, so it didn't receive much food for its brain. On the other hand, it always slept on the trees and had no serious hunters. It gradually lost its mental abilities because of this. The koala has one of the smallest brains in proportion to the body weight of any mammal. Due to severe energy limitations and the smaller and simpler brain requiring less energy, this change allowed it to survive in that environment. According to Darwin in The Descent of Man, almost everything a wise man possesses, such as emotions, tools, language, and society, is found in many other creatures in more primitive forms. There is a difference between us and them, but it is smaller than we think. This intelligence, however, was not all useful. As our understanding increased, we suffered more. According to some people, maybe intelligence is more of a curse than a blessing.